The mean world and cultivation theory. Good morning. Last time we learned that media doesn't tell us what to think. It tells us what to think about. Today we ask a deeper, slower question. Forget a single day's headlines. What happens to your entire view of the world after 10 years of watching the same kinds of stories night after night? Not a single message, not a single broadcast, a slow drip over years, quietly reshaping what you believe is true about the world you live in. Our story moves into the 1960s and 70s, a period when television had fully entered the American home and become for many families the primary storyteller of daily life. A researcher named George Gerbner, dean of the Annenberg School for Communication, launched a massive, decades-long research project called the Cultural Indicators Project. Gerbner wasn't interested in single messages or single elections. He was interested in something much bigger. What happens to a society that spends thousands of hours immersed in a shared, repeating symbolic world, television rather than direct lived experience? Cultivation theory argues that heavy long-term exposure to television gradually cultivates a view of reality that matches the world as depicted on screen, rather than the world as it statistically exists. Gardner's most famous finding was what he called mean world syndrome, because television, especially crime, dramas, and news, vastly overrepresents violence compared to real-world statistics. Heavy viewers consistently overestimated their own risk of being a victim of crime and expressed greater fear, mistrust, and support for authoritarian, tough on crime policies than light views did even after controlling for actual neighborhood crime rates. Garnett distinguishes this from simple persuasion. It isn't that television convinces you of an argument. It's that television, through sheer repetition over years, defines your baseline sense of what's normal, resonating with and reinforcing existing anxieties until they harden into a stable, mistaken worldview. Sociologically, cultivation theory describes something profound. Television in Gardner's era functioned like a shared cultural storyteller. The roles once played by religion, family, elders, or community folklores. He called the cultural mainstreaming. Heavy viewers across different backgrounds, classes, and political views would gradually converge toward a similar television-shaped worldview, blurring differences that would otherwise exist between them. This raises serious questions about social cohesion and control. If a small number of media producers define the symbolic environment an entire society observes, they hold enormous influence over collective attitudes toward crime, minorities, gender roles, and authority, often without any single broadcast ever containing explicit persuasion. Why this matters psychologically? Psychologically, cultivation theory rests on a slow, cumulative process rather than a single cognitive event. It draws on ideas of chronic accessibility, the idea that concepts and fears activates repeatedly over time because mentally defaults surfacing automatically when we judge risk or make decisions, even in situations where they don't logically apply. This differs meaningfully from agenda settings' short-term availability effect. Cultivation isn't about which topic is fresh in memory this week. It's about which worldview has been rehearsed so many times that it no longer feels like a belief. It simply feels like common sense, like the way the world is. Cultivation theory has drawn substantial criticism too. Critics point out methodological problems. Cultivation studies often show correlation, not clear causation. Do fearful people simply watch more television rather than television making people fearful? Entangling that direction of influence has proven difficult. Others argue Gabriel treated television as a single, uniform force, when in reality, audiences actively select, interpret, and resist content differently based on their own background, echoing the same critique symbolic interactionists raised against purely message-centered models. And the theory was built entirely around broadcast television, with its shared mass-produced content. It offers no obvious answer for media environment when no two people watch quite the same thing. So why does it matter today? Because cultivation may be more relevant now than when Gerbner first proposed it, just distributed differently. Instead of one shared broadcast cultivating a national worldview, personalized algorithmic feeds now cultivates millions of separate, individually tailored worldviews, each one shaped by whatever content a given person's engagement patterns keep surfacing. This is precisely the logic behind concerns about social media, rabbit holes, and radicalization. Not a single persuasive video, but months of years of the feed quietly, repeatedly reinforcing one particular version of reality until it simply feels like the truth. Urban's mean world effect has arguably been personalized and handed directly to an algorithm. So we've gone from a single message to a negotiated conversation to a socially performed self to a society's shared agenda and now to something slower and deeper still. A worldview quietly built, one rerun, one feed, one scroll at a time. But cultivation theory, like agenda sitting before it, still treats audiences as relatively passive observers of repeated content. It doesn't fully explain why some people watch the same programming and walk away completely unmoved, actively resisting or reinterpreting what they see. That question belongs to our next theory, one that flips the entire premise on its head and asks not what media does to people, but what people actively seek out and do with media in the first place. Uses and gratifications theory. Thank you.